All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to On the Trail with Kevin and Scott, the Jeep show with two guys that, for some reason you guys like to listen to us. So I'm Kevin, the engineer, and, I'm the guy that reads instructions, typically, uses the right tools when I have them and follows those instructions. And most importantly, when I deviate from the instructions, I know I'm responsible for the results. Across from me, in the electronic aether at the moment.
And I am Scott. I am the over-caffeinated slapstick parts guy that is sitting here like the nervous squirrel in a hot tin roof while watching a cat. I mostly read exactly. I mostly read instructions, and right now I guess I don't know. It's an odd ether day today. I guess I don't know. It's a weird day in a way. I don't know.
A weird day.
I don't know. The point is thank you for tuning in and enjoying us. Again, apologies again for the couple little mix-ups, but hey, we are here, we are good, and Kevin has a nice summation. But again, before we get into that, while we will share what worked for us as well as what didn't, it's always up to you to do your research, and I'm telling the whole thing again and again.
You decide what you want to do to your Jeep. Don't be driven by trends, and then please read the instructions and follow them.
Yes.
It's going to turn out a little bit better that way.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, that's over there smirking, going up and down.
No, yeah, because it's been...
I can see the starter motor behind the eye is kind of going...
1 second, let me add a little more caffeine to this.
Oh, yeah, let's just see. Well, I'm going to chime in while he's down there slugging his whatever it
Celsius.
was. Huh?
Celsius.
Oh, Celsius. That's a new something, huh? To me, that was always a temperature in Europe. Yeah. Let's just kind of summarize where the inebriated driver removed the finishing of the show last pre-Milton recording that didn't get posted.
I'm sorry. No, I deserve this.
No, the punchline is very simple, and what I was going into was the fact that we are dawning into a new opportunity in terms of building vehicles, all vehicles, but Jeeps are kind of our focus here, in terms of swapping power plants, because in the old days, as I'd mentioned, we could do anything we wanted because it was just everybody had a 12-volt ignition wire that turned things on and off, and everybody had a fuel line that hooked up, and then you kind of cobbled your exhaust, and as long as you could bolt a drive shaft to it, you could drive whatever vehicle. And, the advent of electronics changed all that because things got smarter and they got more complicated and they got more nanny state so that you couldn't easily swap things without a programmer or without somebody who could make it talk. I shouldn't say that it didn't work. I know in GM's case you could, as I kind of said before, but in many cases you didn't have dash, you didn't have gauges. You were in a world of hurt. You usually ended up duplicating systems. In fact, for a while that was the common thing in Jeeps, is you ran two ECU PCMs to be able to have gauges and that. So, but where it's ending up now is the aftermarket is rising to the forefront. I talked about a couple of those. And you can now buy standalone ECUs with a harness that will hook up to most manufacturers' motors, and there are standard files available for most of those to download to operate 4s, 6s, 8s. I don't think they go beyond 8s yet, but you never know. And gives you the ability to, tune, adjust, and have a standardized output without all of the nanny state stuff. And most of them, I'm happy to see, are OBD2 compliant, as well as most of them are, in fact, environmentally conscious, depending on how you tune them, obviously.
Yeah.
So in other words, they're cleared for on-road use. I've worked with Holly a few times on people's builds, and it's been pretty awesome that way, that they were very, very helpful. And it kind of opened a new realm. So I'm looking forward to hearing from what all of you out there are doing with your engine swaps. Yes, I know it's probably cheaper in the short haul to use a factory ECU. Done quite a few of those. But you all know as well as I that, you're stuck with the tune of whatever that engine and ECU came out of. And as my friend who had a YJ that we converted, with a 5.3 LS that was a avalanche tune. It definitely did not wake up and begin, handle the Jeep very well. Everybody said, well, the avalanche is bigger. It should be better. Nope. The tune was so far off and the throttle response just drove him nuts. But once we had it tuned, which was another $800 to tune, that's after you got the thing running, bought everything, put it in and got it running. Then it started behaving. Well, the Holly system is only slightly more than that tune cost, much less everything else. So anyhow, that was the point of the show. There's your wrap up. Sorry, it's quite a bit of time between the two, but we've had some fun here. Let's see, what was her name? Helena, and his name was Milton.
Yes.
And we gave you a short snippet, 2 weeks ago or whatever it was, a week ago, whenever Scott releases this show.
Let's be honest here.
So that's kind of the wrap up in the front end. Now, on to the topics of
this show.
Do you have any?
Oh, I got a bunch of them. I want to start off first by congratulating Mark on a very, very well-run Florida Trail Team Challenge adventure.
Okay. That would be Mark Lawson of the Jeep Lab, who is the primary host and organizer for
the Florida Trail Team Challenge.
There you go.
And sorry, I'm still catching up from sleep. Again, it was a great event. And so if you're interested next year, two ways to do this. One, check out their website, their Facebook page. I'll put a link somewhere in the show notes. And two, if you want to volunteer, he right about half a year out, he starts asking for volunteers. So basically, you message Mark and say, "Hey, I'd like to be a volunteer," and they'll get you part of the volunteers. And that was a lot of fun. I can tell you this right now. I don't want to spoil too much because again, you got to be careful and keep things close to the chest. But I learned a lot this past weekend. I learned about high lift jacks. I learned about what happens when you don't maintain a high lift jack.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the things I saw people doing. This one gentleman, one of the challenges, of course, it's a very common challenge. It's every year, is changing a tire. And Kevin, you would love this. What it was, there's a guy out in Colorado, and I saved his information. It's called a Taylor Jack. Brennan's Garage in Colorado. Brennan's, BRENNENNS or something like that. If you Google it, you'll find it. He sells a kit. Now, everyone, the first team we had was a Gladiator with a diesel in it, and it was on coilovers, king coilovers, the whole 9 yards, and you getting a high lift jack on something with a 6.5-inch lift already, with a big suspension droop. You and I both know you need a 60-inch jack, and you're going to be there a while. These guys were smart. They ratchet strapped the axle so it wouldn't droop. So it was 3 or 4 pumps, and they could get the wheel off and do all that. That was ingenious. But what this one team did, this guy had this jack, and what they did is they put the block underneath the axle. Mm-hmm. He takes this jack out. It's a kit that you can slide it out and put the pin in it, and it has a trailer tongue jack on it. And he puts it inside the wheel, jacks it up like 5 turns, and it immediately gets the wheel off the ground. They put a jack stand under the axle. Then they can change out the wheel and do that. And I'm looking at this jack. Excuse me. I'm burping fire here, guys. Sorry. This jack, they had the wheel off and back on in under 3 minutes. Okay.
Wow. NASCAR pit stop. In
a field. And I just looked at this jack going, this thing is really cool because I'm watching people use it, and I had to ask him, and of course he told me about it, and I couldn't keep them very much, because they had to keep going. But the guy said they used that jack all weekend long, and it came in very handy. And I saw that, I'm like, that is a way to think outside the box, man. He just hooked it on the wheel, just boop, 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 boom. And that was really cool. And then we did another one where they had to rebuild a high lift jack, and someone at the end did the same thing. They just jammed it into the race lock bead with a little lip in the bead. 3 pumps, had the wheel up off the ground, and they were able to simulate a jack rebuild in under a minute 30 seconds. Wow. All you had to do is take the jacking mechanism off the I-beam and slide it back. That was rebuilding the jack. And the guys did something really cool. They literally did the wing nut off the top. and just slid it out, slid it back on. That's all he had to do. People were going down and trying, they're overthinking it. But I learned so much again about high lift jack safety, just all kinds of really cool things that people do on all these challenges and events. So if you're interested and you want to really test your challenges, check out that event. That was a really cool experience. Another part that was really cool was the fact I met Frank. He was my partner on this. And Frank, or Kevin, you have a guy that I can tell you right now absolutely loves the wiring stuff. He sung our praises. And really cool thing was, guess what his rig was, Kevin? It was a Mitsubishi Raider. An old 80s Mitsubishi Raider was his rig. That is the coolest thing, man. Because that's actually a little throwback. What got me into off-roading, the old early 80s Isuzu Trooper 2s. I love that boxy style. And that's what actually got me interested in four-wheel drive vehicles. So looking at this vehicle, he made his own half doors. Again, it was a super fun event, super cool to see all the Jeeps and the different rigs and different builds. You had people from Stocks. You had Mary Barnes out there from BF Goodrich. She was one of the teams. Her and her partner, man, they were killer. They were absolutely amazing in the work they did.
Mary is quite the competitor and quite skilled, and no question about that. So.
Yeah, no, and everyone's saying our praise, and now it kind of reminds me why everyone kept saying, "You guys okay?" Because we haven't heard the show in a while. And I'm like, here we go. So that explains that. But anyways, that was a great weekend. Had a lot of fun, learned a lot, and as I process all the information and get my thoughts coherent and not like a caffeinated squirrel, I'll have more topics about it, because I want to make sure what I can and can't talk about, because I don't want too much out there, because again, it is a contest. But again, it was a very fun time, including the canoe figure eights that someone kept dumping themselves out of the canoe and lost their wallet. So if you find a wallet out in a lake in the middle of Citrus, it belongs to Team Moose Knuckle. So with that, how are you doing today, Kevin?
Well, I'm doing fine. And all in all, it's kind of interesting because apparently my volunteer for that support didn't make it through. I don't know what happened. We'll work on it next year to see if I can get up there as well. But that's okay, because I ended up doing quite a bit here. And we'll talk a little bit about this show and maybe another one. I attended FabTech here in Orlando. It's the first year FabTech's been in Orlando. And for those that don't know, it is everything you can imagine about fabrication, not specific fabrication. So there was everything there from welding, cutting, folding, machinery, robots, but custom building, just anything you can imagine. For those that haven't ever been there, the Orange County Convention Center outside Orlando is flat out enormous. Not quite on Las Vegas style, but close.
Cool.
It took over all 3 buildings.
Nice.
Just walking between them was incredible. I got to meet some of the people that I have, read about, followed their writings, their teachings, some of the YouTube channels. One in particular was Jody Collier. Jody runs weldingtipsandtricks.com. He is a professional welder, shop owner, has been a teacher as well, posts incredible videos. I will tell you, folks, short and sweet on that, if you're welding something and you haven't had training, you really should get it, to be honest with you, to be a safe welder. But if you need to figure out something, I don't care whether it's MIG, TIG, oxyacetylene, things I don't even know about, Jody has a gift for explaining and demonstrating, and the camera gear to show you what it's like from behind the mask. He talks about wires. He talks about materials. He talks about welders. He did comparisons. I personally used his review from quite a few years ago for a small single user class welder, and that's how I ended up with the 212 MVP that I run. And he was laughing at me. He says, I still have the test from years ago and use it in the shop. He's that level. He's very personable, but I cannot stress how, there are some teachers that just have the ability to get the message across cleanly and clearly. And Jody is that guy in the welding world. So, meeting him. I also ran into several people for other processes. And I'm going to tease on this one. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it is an up and coming process in automotive restoration, as well as a lot of the rest of the fabrication industries. And we may even get one of their representatives on the show. So there's something on that that's coming up in the near future.
Cool.
And then, beyond that, I've had the usual. I had a service call that I'll talk about in the tech segment when we get to, that led me, not that the thing was so unusual, but it put the concept in my head. It was an experience that gave me the opportunity, speaking of teaching, of how to bring a subject matter to the auditory format of a podcast.
Okay.
And I hope it works for you guys. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's it's been, and then of course, as we mentioned before, been cleaning up and repairing from Milton.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that will still continue for quite a while yet.
Yeah.
I'm sad to say that we are now, this is just before Halloween, and when we're recording this, and we are still hauling debris out. The landscape in Central Florida has changed visually. Fortunately, it is what it is, and we're kind of used to it. It's kind of like, asking a Californian about living through an earthquake. They're like, "Yeah, I survived. It was a good one."
Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing here, but this was a Lulu. Anything else on your end so far before we move on to?
Well, actually, I just got to do one thing real quickly because it looks really cool. Hold on. Sorry, I'm just like, man, I look handsome today. So I just took a picture of myself with a microphone in front of me. I'm like, this is a pretty cool picture. But anyways, no, actually, I did actually want to touch on something Milton related because I actually posted about this on another page, a local page here. And that is being patient with these businesses. Like our good friends at Gulf Coast Drive Shaft, you mentioned Gabe at the Jester Graphics. Yep. There are countless businesses that were affected by Milton and
severely.
Yeah, and even and even through Helena, Dory's parents lost the campground. They were just a mile down the road from Lake Lure, Chimney Rock, and when luckily the dam held, but when they flooded the area, a lot of people were affected. So when these businesses do come back online, make sure to give them your business as best you can and be patient with them because that was their livelihood. Some places are struggling a little bit. Even my place was affected, and we lost one phase of our 3-phase power. So things were not good at my work, but we soldiered through and we did the best we could. So we just asked for people's patience, So when you talk to these companies, again, do I need a lot of sticker work right now? No, but I said this on my post that once I'm going to give them let them get back on their feet in the shop running. Once they're back up running, I'm going to buy a sticker. I'm going to support their business. Unfortunately, right now I don't need any drive shaft, but that doesn't mean I can't, tell other people, hey, if you need drive shaft work, check out Gulf Coast Drive Shaft. They're back up and running.
Yeah, they're back up and running, and they're very, very fortunate. I was over there in the week following just to see if they needed anything, but they were very happy to say that while they did have water throughout the facility, none of it got high enough. Folks, they have 480 volt systems in there that, have the potential to go nuclear in rainwater. Yeah. But yes, that was, let's just say if your carbon fiber custom drive shaft is 3 or 4 days late, I wouldn't complain. I would say, thank you. You got it out because they were out working, standing in the water to try and meet customer orders. So these businesses are just really trying to do the right thing. So,
yeah. Just again, an ounce of patience is definitely preferred, and like even with us, like Kevin and I are a business, and again for us it's just recording. But Kevin didn't have power. Luckily he's got what kind of internet do you have again? Starlink.
Oh, I have Starlink.
Yeah,
so I was the one who was out 6:30 Thursday morning after Helena had headed your way and was over teasing you. Or not Helena, I'm sorry. Milton was out teasing you. I reinstalled my dish. I took it down with myself and the neighbors for the wind and the debris, and then put it back up. And with the generator, I was back online. So I was also playing Information Central for a lot of the neighbors.
Yeah, but so again, we were affected a little bit. But again, for us, it's simple. I mean, this really isn't a business. It's just a hobby and way to get information out and really again, help the Jeeping community, if you will. So we're more of a sounding board for these businesses, if you will. But again, that's again, sorry, it's trying to get my thoughts in order today. It's been a long.
You don't have thoughts right now. You have 1,000 squirrels and one over-caffeinated Yorkie.
I'll just let the cat out of the bag. Kevin kind of already knows. After I get done recording today, I'm officially legally going to get married here in less than 3 to 4 hours. So my mind is kind of on that at the moment. The ceremony's in December, but I get cats out of the bag. I'm getting married in a few hours, so that is kind of messing with my head a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm very happy. I'm very excited for it.
That's to be expected,
Yeah.
So,
and as Autumn made the joke today, this for both of us, because she's a widow too. This is marriage number 2, so we're the stuff. Marriage 2, we're the stuff. Never mind, it was funny.
Okay.
So, but anyway, so my mind is a little distracted from that. Plus, and Kevin did throw me the curveball. I'm really affected by the fact I forgot to release the show. Man, I can't let that go. I feel so bad. That's just being real. This is a peek behind the curtain. And my mind right now is going, you idiot. No. I'm telling Kevin, don't worry, just listen to the show. It's fine.
2 hurricanes within 2 weeks, a marriage, and trees all over the property, and all that. Yeah, okay. So you managed to divert your laser focus a little bit. That happens.
Yeah.
That does happen.
Yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm at right now. But no, back to the other good things, though. And I really have to say this. So, Kevin and I talk about feedback is crucial. All I kept hearing is about how, like, you talked about the audio format. Maybe this might be a good segue for this, but I can tell you right now, a lot of people really, truly do love the technical segments, and we got so many compliments because of one, and Kevin and I will almost never toot our own horn because we're just not that kind of show. But, we know the chemistry Kevin and I have. We're friends. We work well together. And more importantly, is it comes across in the show, and that's one thing we kept saying. People love the absolute, they love the levity and fart jokes I bring, but more importantly, though, they love the fact that, Kevin, seriously, you get that information out and people look for it, especially when you get into that wiring and how they break down the vehicle systems and engineering and all that. So kudos to you. So if you have more ways, and if you have any more feedback you'd like to give us, on the trail podcast at gmail.com, Facebook message, whatever you need to do, by all means, please. The feedback is key because we can bend the show to your will. I guess you could say.
8 years ago, we started with a concept that this really wasn't our show.
Mm-hmm.
This is us for you, the listener's point of view. And we seriously do take feedback from the listeners, ideas, suggestions, questions. If I don't know it, I'll go dig it up. Yeah. That's kind of the way it works. And I don't want to say it's me. It was actually a misstate. We dig it up because Scott takes subject matter just as seriously as I do. For all the comedic that comes in here, that's a gift he has. Mm-hmm. But his skills go way beyond. He's one of the guys that I call when I need to know parts and numbers and fit ups. Yeah. He was just helping me last week, look up some basic information that was MIA in the world. And so, yeah, it's kind of important that way. Yeah. Kind of important that way. So anyhow, where are we going from here?
Well, did you want preference? You had the one thing you talked about the ways.
Since you segued nicely on wiring, sure. Let's go do what we used to say. We still do. Yeah, let's go play in the garage for a few minutes. Exactly. This one's not going to be with wrenches. This one will be with test lights and multimeters, and talk about that, typically scary subject. Whoa. God, quick. The code is no.
Yeah, really. That's funny.
That's one heck of a ringer tone.
Well, unfortunately, my phone is attached to the board, and usually I have everything shut off, and apparently Family Health Sense is trying to tell me my prescription's ready.
Oh, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, the subject matter is that which sends most people fleeing in terror into a spider web of wiring. Um, this little segue is goes out to Joe. Joe is a new friend. Was recommended to me by Shane at Gulf Coast Drive Shaft. Um, and and Joe is a great guy. Unfortunately, Joe on a trip recently had some health issues and came home, and he collects vehicles. Okay, he has some very neat classic cars from quite a few generations. You know, from the 50s into the 60s, 70s, and he has a TJ. Unfortunately, when he came home from the travel, his TJ was having a crank no start issue, and nobody could seem to solve it. So uh, Shane asked me if I would be interested in giving him a hand, and I discussed it. And so, long story short, I did. I went out there last week and stopped by, and we kind of poked and prodded, and sure enough, it was a crank no start. And the symptoms, I'm going to put it this way, at the time were no dash and no fuel pump.
Okay.
Um, and he'd also said that he'd tried the starter fluid in the intake and cranking and no fire. Now, we'll take that with a grain of salt because he was using WD-40 as a starting fluid. And yeah, that can work, but it's not exactly like ether or anything else.
Yeah.
After doing some poking and prodding, it was clear that I did not have sufficient information with me or tools to, easily solve it. So I said, look, give me the weekend, and I'll get back to you and we'll set up a time. And after I was having lunch with a friend of mine, Bob, guy, we put the 53 LS and the 95 YJ. And he's like, oh, can I go with you? Sure. So long story short, the other day we met over at Joe's house, and I brought the arsenal in the back of the Jeep. and it made it look to Joe like I knew everything right then and there. But the truth is I had spent the better part of probably 6 hours reading the factory service manual for a 97. And where this is coming from, folks, is the thought processes to diagnosing electrical issues. That in itself is probably what stops most people, is you want to be able to open the hood, and in most cases, I want to just open the hood or look under the dashboard and go, oh, there it is. And you're looking in the wrong place. What I do typically, so that you understand how to do electrical, at least as basics, the first thing I do is take a notepad and write down the symptoms, those identifiable things you can see. It cranks, but it doesn't start. It doesn't. Yeah, that's usually my line, Scott.
Sorry.
Being in the tool, the springs. I just make myself short notes, no dash, can't hear fuel pump, apparently no spark. And I usually use those words, apparent versus what I witness as fact, Right. So, and then I'll go back and sit down and say, what could cause that combination? And that's why it's important to know what's apparent and what's actual. All right. And I will sit down, and you do need to understand the basics of how an automotive engine runs. Okay. Fuel, spark, air, bang, Yeah. And, you start saying, okay, let's start with fuel pump. I don't hear fuel pump. It's either very quiet or it's not running. Well, what makes a fuel pump run? Well, electricity. So what turns on the electricity? Well, let me go look up the fuel pump system on the wiring diagrams. And it tells you, the wiring diagrams show you that one little byte. There's the fuel pump. There's one wire that goes over, and it says it goes to the chassis ground at this point. Okay, that's my ground line. And there's a little line that goes up. Oh, it goes through this connector and that connector. Oh, it goes into a relay in the PDU, power distribution unit. And that is fed by this fuse. in the PDU, which is then fed, by the battery. Okay, that's the other end. Well, what triggers the relay? Oh, okay. Well, that same battery feed goes into a coil of the relay, and that then goes over to the ECU as, okay, so the ECU, or, whatever you want to call it, I'm calling them ECU, grounds to ground to make the relay close, which makes the fuel pump run. All right.
Right.
So what does that tell me? Nothing other than here's a test process. Go in. You can pull the relay, or you can I used a relay bypass that goes in and the relay plugs in on top, but it gives you little terminals on the sides that you can touch and check voltages and inject voltages and etc. Okay. So I made up a test to test the actual fuel pump. Second thing, dash. Why do I not have a dash? Okay. That's kind of weird. Why is it weird? Well, I looked at the dash wiring diagram. It's very confusing, but the main thing, all I'm looking for is powers and grounds, And I went and I looked, and sure enough, the dash is not controlled by the ECU. And I remember in the work that I've done, when the ECU is out and I turn the key on, the dash still lights up. The gauge is still 0, flip once and come back. But down where the odometer is, it usually has in broken letters made by, single line elements,
right.
No bus, NO space BUS. Means it's got no CAN bus feed. This didn't have that. Well, what does that tell me? Well, I don't have power to the dash or ground. I don't have ground. Where are they and how do they hook up? So I looked at the fuse and the connectors and that kind of thing and made notes to that effect. The idea here is to pre-build your test plan in your head. So when you go out, you'll have the right tools, because you go, okay, I'm going to use a test light for that. I'm going to use a meter for this, those kind of questions. And then I get to the ECU. And I was kind of shocked that the 97 ECU is much simpler than the later models.
Nice.
First thing you check out is powers and grounds. Well, there's only 2 powers and 2 grounds. There's a battery power feed to the ECU, and then there's a key switch that wakes it up. And then there's 2 ground pins. Oh, okay. So I want to check this pin, this pin, this pin for power, ground, those kinds of things. If those are all bad, so to speak, I can look at, it might be the key switch, because the key switch is common to all of those. The key wakes up the ECU, key turns on the power to the dash, key triggers feed power to the fuel pump. So my first, I'm not going to say assumption, but target was the key switch. And if you have a TJ, given that the youngest one was built in 06, key switches are going to go. Mine has gone. They do break, and there's different wipers and contacts, and you can go look in the wiring diagram and see. But the key is, if you don't have, boy, that's a pun. The key is,
nice.
If you don't have power out in the right timing on a key switch, that can screw up everything. So I admit, I went over there fully expecting it to be a key switch issue. I was wrong.
Really?
That's okay, because the planning session set me up for that. So the first thing I did was, okay, let's check the key power out. And I did it as the easiest place that I could, which was to go to not crawl under and disassemble the dash, not to pull the steering column apart to get to the key switch itself. I went to the ECU, okay, and disconnected the 3 connectors, looked up through the wiring diagrams. They give you a connector head piece, and it says pin 1 is battery power and pin 2 is key switch power. So I had Bob, who was with me, we grounded the meter, because I want to use what's called a high impedance device. Lights can, incandescent lights can draw a lot of current, and if you're checking wires that aren't really designed for current, you can fry wires just with your test.
Yeah.
You can use an LED test light, which is a high impedance test light, or you can use a multimeter, which is extremely high impedance. It's almost like the computer doesn't know it's there. And the computer was disconnected, but I just don't want to damage things. So,
yeah.
So I said, Bob, here, I said, go over here and touch pin 1. And he touched pin 1 from the back, from the face of the connector, not even sticking anything in it, just touching it. He says, oh, I'm reading 12.7 volts. That was a clue to me, and I didn't realize it at the time. And I said, okay, now pin 2. No, 0, nothing. I said, that's fine. The key's off. Let me turn the key on. And I'm thinking, I'll turn the key on and nothing will happen. 12.7 volts. I moved the key several times. Well, crap. Theory 1 just went out the window.
Right, yeah. Wah, wah.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, if it's not power, you can't work it if it doesn't have a ground.
Right.
Let's change the meter to continuity. And again, I'm checking to the negative terminal of the battery, not to a bolt, not to the frame, to the battery, because that's where it actually has to go to. And we had 2 perfect grounds.
Okay. So much for that theory.
Yeah. So is the ECU dead? But that doesn't control the dash. Why does the dash not work? And then I went in and rolled the key all the way over, and lo and behold, the dash came alive. Okay, is the key switch back on the table? What's going on here?
Right.
Okay. And then I was like, Bob says, hey, what did you do? I said, why? He said, the voltage just dropped to 11 volts. Interesting. So, hint 2, when you're doing electrical, pay attention to side effects.
Right.
Okay. I tapped the starter, just bumped it, voltage dropped to 9 volts. I said, shit, we have a dead battery. We have a blown battery, with a dead cell. All right. But, all right, we threw a charger on it, brought it back up to 13 volts. It's not really taking the charge, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, well, let's not jump. Keep with your plan. Let's go check the fuel pump. So we walked up and I said, okay, I'm pulling a relay, put the relay checker in there. I'm going to ground the coil lead ground, and we don't hear the fuel pump. Okay. Well, let me go over for a second. He says, well, so the fuel pump's dead. I said, fuel pumps and TJs have bit me in the ass a few times. So I went over and took the filler cap off and actually stuck my ear next to the filler line. And I said, now go ahead and ground that. And I could hear the pump come on. And I looked up and I said, well, since the dash was dead before, I said, did you perchance? He said, yeah, the tank's full. Oh, crap. You're not going to hear the fuel pump with the tank full. So that was a red herring. Okay.
Right.
I said, okay, go to the computer connector. It's pin, don't quote me on this, but 22 on connector C150. Ground that. And fuel pump came in, unground it. Fuel pump went off. I said, fine. Bob's like, what is that? I said, you just validated the entire control and operational circuit of the fuel pump. It's fine.
Okay.
He goes, that's all I have to do? I said, yep. I said, so now I've got another theory. So let's validate a few other control features. A PCM officially is what Chrysler calls it, but ECM, PCM has basically powers, sensor ins, and controls out. Now, if it's not working, I can't check controls out. All right. But because obviously there's nothing coming out.
Yeah.
But I can check all of the in feeds or controls that it operates through a grounding path. And we went along and we checked any of the other ones. I don't remember exactly what there are, but you can make plug coils spark occasionally. Since the 97 used a distributor, I couldn't do that. But you can check various things. You can make injectors click by grounding the one line. You've got the numbers, so you don't even do anything. You don't unbolt anything. You just pull a connector off and go dit, and it goes click, 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 click. We could not find anything system-wise that was not working, which basically says power is there, yes. Grounds are there, yes. Outputs or inputs, control circuits are functioning, yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's really only one answer. You know what that is, Scott?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
dead ECU.
Yeah, that was what I was kind of going with.
Bed. Now, I'm not too crazy about spending people's money, so I don't call my friend, our friend,
yes,
at you know who.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not be shy about giving him a shout out.
Yeah.
Mark Cantrell at WranglerFix.com. Mark has been a good friend to the shows for years. So I called up 1-800-MARK. And he's like, look, I'm at the bank right now. Can I call you back? Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So he called back a little later, and I said, look, this is what I want to run through. And he said, what year is it? I said, 97. He said, blown capacitors. I said, are you sure? My phone went ding, and there's a picture of the ECU, of an ECU. He says, yep. And I says, ballpark? I said, just so that the guy, he says, $600. $600, flashed to his bin, delivered, probably in 2 days, and a 1-year warranty. I'm like, are you sure? Do you really? He says, yeah, that's the price we charge everybody for that, that model. He says, it's very common, very common.
Yeah.
And he said, it's just the way it works. So long story short, we cleaned up, snapped a few things back together. Virtually not virtually. I didn't take a single bolt off. And I left the gentleman with, okay, you need a new battery. You need a new ECU. Here's the guy for the ECU. You need your VIN. You need your mileage. And I think that was, the make, model, and year kind of a thing. And Bob was running around as I was telling him that with a piece of paper, writing it all down for it, and handed Joe the information. I said, here's the phone number. Call him on this number. He's expecting you. I said, you can go to anyone else. He said, but I have not had much luck with anybody else other than Mark. Mark has always been the most responsive, supportive. So the point to this isn't selling Mark. Mark was the solution, but the analysis, it's a little, electrical can be frightening simply because of the complexity. Even when you open the wiring diagrams, you look at this spider web of lines with little numbers all over the place. As you start with something and you take the time to look at the wiring diagram for your Jeep, though, you'll see things that will catch your eye. Oh, look at that. There's a pictograph of dial faces, and it'll say dash, and the organizational structure will tell you that. And then you can go in, and if you just pick one line and kind of follow it from end to end, you'll start to see, oh, okay, that's the oil pressure gauge. It goes into the ECU. Well, then where does the oil pressure data come from? And you'll realize, oh, there's another line over here that says oil pressure sensor. And you'll go, oh, look at that. It goes, hey, look, there's a picture of that oil pressure sensor that's on the side of my engine beneath the coil pack. Oh, what are these other wires for?
Right.
And you'll follow it back, and you'll see it'll say sensor power and sensor ground. And you'll go, oh, so there's sensor. And you'll start looking at other things, and very quickly you'll start to see a pattern. Oh, gee, most of these are sensor power, sensor ground, and a reporting wire. One wire. And yes, it takes an investment in time, but it's not hard.
No.
Confusing? Absolutely. Yes. It can be confusing until you start to take it. What I do is, and this is what I did with his, I'll print the page out that I'm working with, and Scott will laugh. There's the secret.
Oh, a highlighter.
A highlighter.
Mm-hmm.
I sit there with a little highlighter, and I will trace out, and it lets you know some things. Here's what's neat about wiring diagrams, is you start following that from battery back, if that's the system that you're working with, you'll have little things that'll have a little dot, and it'll say S, and it'll say, or C. C is a connector, S is a splice. Mm-hmm. Where do you think wiring problems happen most of the time?
In the splices.
A connector or a splice.
Yeah.
The other one's ground. What do you think they are with? A G.
Yeah.
And there's a map in the Chrysler manuals that once you look at, that line just ends in the middle of the page on G105. That's fine. There's a whole chapter. It says ground locations. You go to the table on ground locations and you go G1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 G105, this page. You go to the page, G105. It's located here. It shows a picture of it exactly where it's mounted in a kind of one of those perspective line drawings. It shows you exactly where it's supposed to be. And you will learn about the infamy of G105, which is one of the most common corroding grounds on a Jeep Wrangler.
Oh, of course.
Scott.
No, one of the interesting things is Frank, my partner for the event, he also had a blown ECM. And he also taught me a little thing I didn't know. You probably already know this. Cracked open the case. That when they blow the capacitors, it has a fish smell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I usually, to somebody of Joe's experience, now Joe is very knowledgeable on cars, but carburetors and distributor level. Okay, that's what his focus is. That's what his,
Yeah, that's what he
hobby
knows.
is.
Yeah.
And cracking an ECM, he has no reference to compare it against.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yes, it's fascinating. And in fact, Bob was like, are we going to open it? And I says, well, here's the thing. If it's not broken and we crack it open, it will be broken.
Yeah. Well,
we'll violate the seals. And I said, Mark, we'll check every incoming blown ECM to make sure it's not wrongly diagnosed.
Right.
So I said, at this point, yeah, I'm comfortable enough to crack it open, but it's not my Jeep.
Yeah, no. Apparently, like on some of them, they're vented, so you can smell it through the vents. It's like it has a very obvious fish smell. I'm like, well, never heard of that.
That's the compound in a capacitor. A capacitor is just essentially a metal film, or two strips of a metal film separated by a goo that's rolled up or plated or any number of ways where they're very close to each other but not touching. And that allows a charge to build up on the plates, opposite charges, and essentially consider it a very powerful but very low volume battery. Yeah. It can fill up and then discharge and then fill up and discharge. I tell people it's kind of like a battery. Like I always use the water tower as a equivalent for a battery. This would be a very tall, skinny water tower, where it can surge up and down very, very quickly. So it tends to absorb noise and fluctuations in the wire or the current system. And that's really all it does. But it's that separator fluid and or the plates. Once the plates start to corrode, number one, the capacitance goes down. It's like silting up of a water, storage bin.
Yeah.
And if you get enough in there, it either shorts, i.e. it rusts through the water tower and it starts leaking, or it plugs it. And it can't flow at all. And that's exactly what happens in a capacitor. And when it gets to a point where it's leaking too much, heat builds up. And then when heat builds up, guess what that goo does? It turns into peanut butter and starts going everywhere. And it makes a mess of things. The pictures that Mark sent me showed where the capacitors are in a 97 ECU that it just looked like black sludge poured out all over the place.
Yuck. That's the worst tasting peanut butter.
So anyway, folks, that's a very short, I'll admit, kind of a low detail discussion, though, of the thought processes to chasing wiring issues. Inevitably, it does come down to one wire at a time, and then doing your research up front. That's why we always say do your research. But if you're willing to take the time to do your research, you can save, I don't know what your shop costs are, but over here they're between $100 and $120 an hour is the hourly cost. And, I invested personally probably 3 hours of research on this problem, plus an hour and a half at the location. So you can figure out where that bill would be. All right.
Yeah.
So is it worth your time to learn how to do this? Well, only you and your pocketbook can figure that out.
Well, that's part of the fun. I mean, again, you also get to learn and know how to self-diagnose things, which is actually kind of important. Again, you save yourself a little money and know how to repair your own stuff. So
yeah, and the thing is you get down to where you only spend what you have to spend. You don't fire the parts cannon needlessly.
Yeah.
I could have put a ignition switch in, and that might have done nothing. Which no, yeah, and the same thing with a battery. Well, I didn't think the battery was bad because before it cranked the Jeep okay. I guess it's a worn 4-cylinder. But the voltage dropped very quickly. Very quickly. By the time we were done with just bumping the engine over, it was down to 7 volts. So yeah,
wow.
it's kind of a tired battery. And he said, well, it's 6 years old. I said, oh Lord, yeah.
Yeah, no, you got your money money's out of that because again, 3 years at most for a regular wet battery right now.
Yeah. Now the thing that's nice to say is, well, I don't have wiring diagrams. Well, the answer is anything older, '06 and older, you can get them for free from the various Wrangler, Jeep Wrangler, what's the pages, the forums, And if you Google a wiring diagram for a certain Jeep, I'm sure it will come up.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be a big deal. I need to just take a break.
Okay.
Okay.
No worries. Yeah, you want, because I'm looking at the time that we do got to get going. We got the thing for the hit to get hitched. So wiring diagrams.
So, but if your Jeep is '07 and later, you'll actually have to pay for a wiring diagram, unfortunately, through one of the aftermarket services for the service manuals. Chrysler in '07 decided to lock everything down and only do it on an online feed. Now you can buy copies of the factory service manual, but you'll be astounded at what they get for that pile of paper. Anyway, that's.
On that note, I will say this, and we just did this. It's funny because guy showed up with a stack of pizzas for the service department.
Can I look in the book?
No, he said, hey, I know they're expensive, but could you guys print me out a few wiring diagrams? And he had a list ready to go of what he needed, and it was a phone book thick by the time we were done. He even brought his own ream of paper.
Oh.
And he brought like 5 or 6 pizzas and said, hey, you guys, would you mind doing this for me? Okay, maybe, the pizzas were like $10 a piece. So he was out $60 plus a ream of paper. And he walked out of there with all the ones he needed. So yeah. I'm just putting that out there. Many times I've gotten some things done on the Jeep when I've dropped it off for service, and there's been a stack of cookies and a box of, Nutter Butters and all that in the passenger seat with a thank you note. And then I usually get a text message from the tech saying, what do you need? I'm like, hey, will you program the backup camera? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'm just saying, everyone does the whole stealership thing and all that, but at the end of the day, these are guys trying to make some food. I've seen things happen when I've walked past and the service writer had a bottle of whiskey under his desk. And all of a sudden, it's a $21 bottle of whiskey, and next thing you know, that warranty got passed just fine. So I'm just saying, at the end of the day, these are people just trying to make a buck.
Take Scott's advice with a grain of salt, folks.
Yes. I'm just saying, money, food, and politeness talks. I'll just say that.
Yeah. But anyway, if you guys have wiring questions, as usual, go ahead and reach out to us, send us an email, or we'll see if we can throw something special on the show for you as well. It's funny, I'm not an electrician. Yes, I'm probably the engineering mindset helps me, kind of get through it. But this is something that I just learned by fixing my own Jeep and share with others. And I will guarantee you that virtually any of you out there, if you want to put forth a little bit of thought processes, you can do it too. It's really not that hard. There's really power, there's grounds, and there's signal. And I guess you could technically add switched power and switched grounds to those, but they're really just powers and grounds. And the only one that's mystical at the moment is signals. And I'm getting ready to probably, drop a few dimes on a portable oscilloscope, pocket oscilloscope kind of a things, so that I can take care of signals, because the signals, it turns out from my own research, and we'll have a whole show on this when I get a pocket oscilloscope and start playing, they turn out to not be as complicated as they seem. The angry pixies only know Morse code.
And wiring plus me equals fire. I'm kidding. I'm joking, folks. I'm joking. Kinda.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Scott has some personal events that he's got to skedaddle off to.
Yes.
So we will be ending this here. Thank you for your time and attention. And again, thank you very much for all of the "Are you guys okay?"
Yes.
unquote. They are appreciated. Yes, we are okay. A little better than we were a week and a half ago.
Oh, yeah. I'm still no better than I was 3 hours ago when Kevin told me I forgot to release a show.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. It was just trying to learn where I stopped talking, because, I didn't actually know where the recording stopped, because I finished the show before I realized that you weren't online anymore.
I even forgot where the buttons were. So,
So with that.
Thank you. As always, on the trail podcast at gmail.com, any messages, and thank you again for listening. And as we always share with this closing line is, remember to take nothing but pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave the trail. And I screwed that up. It's time to hit the trail, put the Jeep in 4 low, and all those other things I just said.
Yeah,
You'd think I haven't done this in a while.
Listeners were telling you what it was without even me saying anything at this point.
Yeah, no, everyone goes, oh, look, it's Mumble Mouth. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
You're distracted for a good reason, Scott.
Yes,
That's important.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, everybody. Well, we're going to end it on this one. And, it'll in the next show, it'll be Mr. and Mrs.
Yeah, but not me and Kevin. All right, with that, later, folks. Have a great day.
Where does his mind go?
I don't know. Bye.